Red Scare TV is brought to you by comrades like you. Thank you. Hello, this is an audio-only episode of Red Scare TV, and today I will be reading a theoretical piece I wrote on Vaush and his main ideological underpinnings. In the pinned comment, in the comment section, you can find the URL to read this. It also comes with a PDF file that you can use so you can print it out, so on and so on. Without further ado, Vaushism, a dysfunctional ideology. Vaushism and its main ideological faults. Vaushism is a colloquial term to describe the ideological perspectives of Vaush himself. Vaush describes himself as an anarcho-syndicalist. What is anarcho-syndicalism? Anarcho-syndicalism is a synthesis of two ideologies, anarchism, hence the word anarcho. Anarchism is an ideology that militantly advocates for the abolition of the state, authority, and all government power to free the individual, and syndicalism, in which the means of production have been seized by labor unions in the form of co-ops. However, the ideological narrative of Vaushism is dysfunctional. While maintaining an ideological stance of anarcho-syndicalism, Vaush also advocates market socialism to achieve anarcho-syndicalism in the sense that Marxist market socialism being a transitional period from capitalism to anarcho-syndicalism. As stated earlier, anarchism is the absolute militant rejection of the state and its ultimate goal. Interestingly, Marxism, even in the most orthodox sense, supports the state to reach communism, as seen in Karl Marx's work Critiquing the Gotha Program, then later echoed in Vladimir Lenin's State and Revolution. Furthermore, Friedrich Engels advocates for authority in the thesis On Authority. Curiously, these ideas are antithetical to every stated goal of anarchism in every single variation thereof. The whole reason Marxism and anarcho-syndicalism are named different things is because of this huge split in ideology. Henceforth, the two are completely inconsolable on the contradiction of ideological stances. Granted, you can disagree on these ideological sentiments. However, you can no longer be an anarchist, nor are you a Marxist. Ideologies have institutional ideas that make them into a functional narrative. Yet, what has caused this dysfunctional narrative for Vaushism, postmodernism, and post-structuralism? The dysfunctionality of Vaushism can be traced back to its foundations. Acting in subterfuge, the foundations of Vaushism are veiled in secrecy, for they are not explicitly mentioned. Nevertheless, they remain as the kernel of Vaushism and its dysfunctionality, that of which is postmodernism and post-structuralism. However, to have not committed the sin that Vaush has committed, that sin is a commitment to buzzwords. Therefore, I will elaborate on the definitions of these terms, starting with postmodernism. Postmodernism is a philosophical movement that stems from the Western intelligentsia. The postmodernist movement began roughly in the 50s or 60s in response to a distrust in institutions. This arose from the aftermath of the atrocities of the National Socialist regime in Germany, also from the Soviet intervention in Czechoslovakia in 1968. In essence, the devastation of the Western philosophical idea of progress, which in the dearly held values of the then Western intelligentsia had collapsed and reversed. Thus, in reaction towards these events, the movements of postmodernism was born. The first kernel of Vaushism is found here. Postmodernism, in a sense, is divorced from relation to realities both social and material. This is in the same way Vaush divorces his ideas from the material and social realities. Therefore, the kernel of postmodernism dictates Vaushism. The prime example of this is how Vaush dictates what socialism is and how it should be. For Vaush has stated that socialism is when basic services in any form of state apparatus are provided. Services such as the post office, the fire department, military, so on and so on. However, this is divorced from the reality of what socialism is based on its ideological definition. For the reality of Vaushism is that his socialism is divorced from the ideological reality, that being socialism is workers' control under a form of democratic expression. This being the dictatorship of the proletariat, to which the dictatorship of the proletariat can exclude these basic services if chosen in a democratic forum. However, it would not be in their class character to do so, as they would exclude themselves from basic necessities. Marxist James Connolly put it best when he said, "Therefore, we repeat, State ownership and control is not necessarily socialism. If it were, then the army, the navy, the police, the judges, the gallowers, the informers, and the hangmen would all be socialist functionaries. To repeat, Vaush has divorced himself from socialism through postmodernism, that of which is one of the two foundations of his ideas. However, Vaush has also divorced himself from Marxism, despite claiming to be thereof. In this context, we must look at his worldview, that being post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is a philosophy that has a similar founding as postmodernism, that being a Western reaction to the Soviet Union and their outlook in the world, which is dialectical materialism. While various interpretations of dialectical materialism have sprouted out, that being humanist and structuralist dialectical materialism, however, the Marxist outlook in the world rejects these philosophies. Marxism is neither. Marxism is rooted in dialectical materialism, unlike the vulgar post-structuralist views of Vaushism, to which I remind you has somehow been synthesized in part from Marxism. Marxism is better suited to understand socialism because it also understands the material conditions. Meanwhile, the worldview of the post-structuralist analyzes the world around it and is divorced from the structural and material and social and material conditions. In essence, the post-structuralist analyzes their worldview only through the symptoms of the superstructure, whereas Marxism analyzes the superstructure and is able to find solutions based on social and material conditions. One instance of the latter is intersectionality. Intersectionality as a philosophical social critique, is only able to achieve surface-level criticism of capitalism and neocolonial repression of minorities in the United States of America, while Kimberly Crenshaw, the founder of intersectionality, is able to conclude that feminism in the United States of America is dominated by white, petty bourgeois women. She is still unable to explain the superstructure that maintains the apparatus that has hitherto maintained the conceptions of whiteness, the petty bourgeoisie, and the woman. Instead, Crenshaw proposes that if any real efforts are to be made to free black people of the constraints and conditions that characterize racial subordination, then theory strategies purporting to reflect the black community's need must include the analysis of sexism and patriarchy. Ms. Crenshaw continues, in order to include black women, both movements must distance themselves from earlier approaches in which experiences are only relevant when they are related to certain identifiable causes. For example, the expression of blacks is significant when based on race, of women when based on gender. However, Ms. Crenshaw does not analyze the superstructure of capitalism, along with its lackey colonialism, which has evolved into neocolonialism, that of which has created the concept of race and racism in the modern sense. Those systems which have evolved chattel slavery and the Jim Crow into the hitherto emerging neo-Jim Crow, all under the guise of liberal reforms. For when a Marxist and a post-structuralist look at a tree and they see that it is sickly, do we find the differences in the two? Post-structuralists, their worldview would be to look at the leaves and blame the tree for being sick, whereas the Marxist assesses the situation with dialectical materialism. Using the material and social conditions are we able to assess what is occurring, for the Marxist first notices that the material condition of the soil the tree is planted in. From this that we can infer what is causing the tree to become sick, that being that the tree itself is sickly because of the contaminated soil. The post-structuralists, based on their divorcement from reality and their reformist attitudes, create a non-solution that only generates the evolution of the sick tree, whereas the Marxist replaces the superstructure of the tree so it can prosper. The same mentality is found in Vaushism and its whateverism. Take, for instance, Vaush's stance for voting on Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election. Vaush's reasoning on this stance is that incumbent Republican President Donald J. Trump is far worse than the Democratic nominee for President Joe Biden. However, such a view is divorced from the reality of the world. While they have their disagreements, their agreements outweigh their differences. While Trump built concentration camps, Vice President candidate Kamala Harris expanded the prison population in California. When Trump escalated tensions with Iran by assassinating Qasem Soleimani, Biden showed soft support for it. While on November 22, 2015, President Trump tweeted an image proposing the racist and neocolonialist outlook on black African Americans in terms of black on white violence, whereas Harris, who became the Attorney General of California in 1990, had incarceration rates for black African Americans double 5 times higher than white Americans. Incarceration rates fueled by ages-old colonialist age of discovery thinking. The same thinking of President Trump. More disturbing is how Biden has chosen Harris to be his vice president pick. A Biden-Harris ticket only serves to further neocolonialist and capitalist interests in various ways. Critically, it also must be noted that President Trump serves the same interests. In essence, the 2020 presidential elections are nothing more than a coin toss. The two sides of the same coin. Conclusion. The non-Marxist worldview of Vaushism, post-modernist and post-structuralist dysfunctional ideology cannot see the reality that's being proposed and put into action. Instead, Vaushism only views the surface and not what's beneath the surface. Furthermore, Vaush's opportunistic tendencies should be noted, in a sense that Vaush's tactics are to vote Biden opportunistically to push for socialism, and a postmodernist sense that is divorced from reality, which in turn divorces itself from class consciousness to opportunistically fit the aims of Vaush. Therefore, Vaush's opportunism abandons the long-term goal of reaching the dictatorship of the proletariat, thus selling out to reformist short-term goals which maintain the bourgeoisie apparatus. It should also be noticed that Vaushism is the ideological dysfunctionality of opportunism, with the amalgamation of ideas and ideologies being trampled by the wheels of a troika consisting of postmodernism, post-structuralism, and finally reformist opportunism, in reality abandoning any form of communism or socialism along the way. Thank you for listening to this. Again, the link to this is in the description and in the comments section. And on the page, there is a PDF file that you can click. It's right at the top. Let's see, you go to the top. It says PDF file can be viewed here. You can click that and you can get the PDF file. Thank you for listening. And as always, red salute.